Good afternoon. My name is Tess Taylor, and I'm a specialist with the Community Education Department at MDA. We're thrilled to have you join us for today's webinar focused on advancements in neuromuscular research. This learning event is part of our larger MDA community education program, which focuses on bringing the neuromuscular disease community together around education and resources. Be sure to visit the community education section on mda.org for updates on upcoming events. We are recording today's event and will be posting it to the website for on-demand viewing at a later date. Everyone registered for today's session will receive that information in their inbox. Please know that all phone lines have been muted, but you can still ask questions. We'll have a Q&A session at the end of Dr. Lek's presentation today. Simply use the chat or Q&A feature to type in your questions. MDA would like to thank our sponsor, Regeneron, for partnering with us to bring you today's webinar. For nearly 75 years, MDA has led the way in funding research to accelerate the development of new treatments, expanding access to care and clinical trials through the MDA Care Center Network, and advocating for access and inclusion for the neuromuscular disease community. MDA delivers its mission through research, access to care, advocacy, education, recreation, and engagement. Since its inception, MDA has invested more than $1.1 billion in neuromuscular disease research. Our MDA care centers are located at over 150 top medical institutions nationwide, providing care from clinicians who specialize in neuromuscular disease. MDA's advocacy work focuses on support for accelerated approvals and novel research, access to healthcare, accessible air travel, and more. This focus plays a vital role in shaping laws and policies that support the needs of people living with rare neuromuscular diseases. Our community education and recreation programs are designed to connect individuals and families. We are committed to building a nurturing environment where our members can share experiences, triumphs, and challenges. Every year, we offer over 40 educational programs, over 20 summer camps, and dozens of other community activities, both in person and virtually. If you haven't done so already, we invite you to join the MDA community by registering with us. Registration is free. Please see the link in the chat for more. To learn more about MDA, please visit mda.org. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Angela Lek. Dr. Lek is the Vice President of Research at the Muscular Dystrophy Association. In her role, she oversees research initiatives aimed at accelerating treatments and cures for neuromuscular diseases via MDA's Research Grants Program. She has an extensive background in research on muscle disorders and translational medicine. Dr. Lek completed her PhD at the University of Sydney, focusing on limb-girdle muscular dystrophy, and pursued postdoctoral training at Boston Children's and Harvard Medical School. Dr. Lek worked as a research scientist at Yale University and has been in her current role with MDA since 2021. In her role, Dr. Lek identifies and supports cutting-edge research in the field, facilitating translation into clinic partnerships with medical, industry, and regulatory partners. Hi, Angela. Dr. Lek, thank you so much for being here today. I will stop sharing my screen so I can turn the time over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you for the introduction, Tess. Something else that I want to share actually is that I am a full-time carer of my husband who has limb-girdle muscular dystrophy. So that adds a unique perspective to my role as both a researcher and a patient advocate. Can you see my screen? I just want to make sure that you can.
Yes, we're good to go. Thanks.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I'm the Vice President of Research, and I've been in this role for just over 3 years. And, you know, I'm a PhD trained scientist. Thank you for inviting me here to tell you a little bit about our impact on neuromuscular disease research and MDA's role. So for those of you who may be new to MDA, you know, we were founded in 1950s by a group of families who were living with muscle diseases, and little was known at this time about what the underlying cause of muscle weakness is, and that, in fact, muscle diseases come in all shapes and forms and are caused by many different underlying factors. And since the 1950s, you know, fast forward to 2025 now, we've funded over $1.2 billion in research all over the United States and also internationally. And we're excited here to be living through a historical moment, really, where we have many approved drugs to treat and improve the lives of neuromuscular disease patients, whereas previously in history, there wasn't anything, no hope. So clearly I didn't coordinate well with Tess because we've got the same slide here. So, this year we're celebrating our 75th anniversary, and all our active efforts in research, advocacy, access to care, um, recreation, and engagement. But today I'll mainly focus on our efforts in research and what we're doing for individuals living with neuromuscular disorders. So, neuromuscular disorders, you may have heard of the term, or you may not have. It basically covers a range of disorders that affect the muscle. Hang on, let me share my cursor. The muscle or the nervous system. So those that affect the nervous system include diseases such as ALS, spinal muscular atrophy, Charcot-Marie-Tooth. It can affect the central nervous system stemming from the brain and or the peripheral nervous system. And they can also affect nerves branching out to the spinal cord, to the limbs. Those are known as the peripheral nerves. Oops, just happened to skip everything. So there are also diseases that affect only muscles, skeletal muscles, and they can also include be accompanied by cardiac dysfunction. These are diseases such as the muscular dystrophies or a range of myopathies that can be genetic or autoimmune in nature. There are also diseases that affect the interface between both the nervous system, where the nerves connect with the muscle, and that's known as the neuromuscular junction. And this includes myasthenia gravis and various forms of congenital myasthenic syndromes. And then there are diseases that affect both the nervous and the musculature system, such as mitochondrial myopathies, myotonic dystrophy, Friedreich's ataxia. That's just a really brief rundown of what neuromuscular diseases cover. So at MDA, we actually, in our portfolio, cover over 330 distinct disorders. And they don't freak out if yours is not listed here, but each of the diseases we cover, these are just the main subcategories. A lot of the diseases we cover can be categorized as either muscular dystrophies, motor neuron disease, inflammatory myopathies, diseases of neuromuscular junction, endocrine myopathies, peripheral nerve disease, metabolic myopathies, or other myopathies. And your disease will fall into one of those 8 broad categories. So as I said, we're really living through exciting times where we're seeing many therapies approved for a range of neuromuscular diseases. And there's been an exponential increase in these approvals over the past few years that we anticipate this trend to also continue, if not improve. And this is largely due to the many decades of investment in drug development by MDA and as well as other advocacy groups who provide seed funding to many research program in its early stages that later blossomed into approved therapies many years later. So since our inception, MDA has funded thousands of research projects as well as investigators all over the world, totaling over $1 billion. So that makes us the biggest funder of neuromuscular disease research, second only to the US federal government. And from this, we're proud to highlight that 10 approved drugs directly originated from MDA-funded research. And at the moment, at this exact point in time, we have 147 active grants representing over $35 million across many of our diseases. So this is what the MDA research team looks like. So Sharon Hesterly is our Chief Research Officer. I'm right here and I lead our team of research funding programs. We've got our 2 portfolio directors and our grant managers. We obviously work really closely with our research conference and events, as well as the MOVA registry, which is our patient database, which I'll go into more detail later on, and our VP of Business Development, Scott. So the majority of our team's activities can be summarized in this slide. So firstly, research grants. So we review and award research grants on a competitive basis, and we stay on top of them. We maintain a clinical registry of patient data. As I mentioned, we make investments in early stage startup companies. We have an ultra rare drug development program through which we are developing a gene therapy. We put on an annual clinical and scientific conference, which is a massive undertaking for everyone in our team. We provide research scholarships and manage an undergraduate research program for those from underrepresented backgrounds. We also have a strategic focus areas where we throw extra resources on topics such as gene therapy and muscle regeneration. And last but not least, we look for ways to synergize with other advocacy groups in the space in order to accelerate the progress of the field. And for the rest of my talk, I'll be delving into each one of these in a little bit more detail. So I'll begin with our grants program and how we utilize donor dollars to help advance research in neuromuscular disorders. So there are several stages involved in drug development. And it usually begins with basic research to identify the genetic cause or disease mechanism. And this typically occurs in an academic setting with researchers that work in a lab or a university or a hospital. And once researchers think they've pinpointed the cause of a disease, they'll then go on to identify a target to drug. And this can be a gene, a protein, or a molecular pathway. This is when research will begin to transition out of an academic setting and into the setting of a small biotech company usually. So once a target and a drug is identified, there is proof of concept testing in using animal models or using patient cells to see if the drug can demonstrate signs of alleviating disease. Next is the stage of translational research, which looks at how to make the drug suitable for human dosing. This could include performing safety studies, scaling up of manufacturing, identifying the right dose, and finally to enter the clinic and begin testing the drug in clinical trials. This requires approval from the Food and Drug Administration, or the FDA, which is a government body here in the United States. And to get up to this stage typically requires millions of dollars of investment and is thus usually undertaken by a larger company. So MDA recognizes these different stages of drug development, and we find various ways to de-risk the drug development process by seeding funds to different stages of this research and development pipeline in order to relieve bottlenecks in the whole process. So, yes. So we have many funding mechanisms here, listed on the left here. Funding mechanism allows us to hold a diverse research portfolio covering many neuromuscular disease. This is just this is a really dynamic portfolio. We're constantly awarding new grants and finishing up grants, but this is what the current portfolio looks like in terms of our investment currently. The largest categories are DMD and ALS, but this changes from year to year. To determine what research gets funded, we have a research advisory committee that helps us review grants every year, and the best scoring research is funded. We don't have a preference for any of the over 300 diseases we cover. It's just we award based on merit and quality of the research proposed that is put in front of us. And And so that is determined by our research advisory committee consisting of world experts in the field. So two examples of current projects in our portfolio are Jeffrey Statland's Muscular Dystrophy Clinical Trial Research Network, which provides resources to 15 different US sites to share resources on clinical trials for FSHD, limb-girdle, and myotonic. And an example of a research grant that we currently fund is Michael Rudnicki's group in Ottawa Hospital Research Institute that looks at stem cell therapies for treating DMD. So at MDA, we believe in working together and synergizing our efforts, resources, and funds with other advocacy organizations who share the same research priorities. And so we frequently reach out to other organizations and identify any common interests, and we figure out a way to co-fund these research areas. These are just some example organizations and projects that we've worked on together that are either ongoing or about to begin. So for those of you who are interested in the research we fund, you can take a look at our Grants at a Glance page where you can search by disease type, grant type, or grantee. And you can read a short description of each of the grants that we fund if you're interested. So through our various funding mechanisms, we hope to make an impact in the following areas of research. So firstly is disease mechanisms. So identifying what exactly is breaking down within the patient's tissues or cells that we need to fix. Secondly, we also want to identify genetic causes of the disease. Is this information encoded in the genome of the patient, in the DNA? Was it inherited, and can this be passed down to successive generations? Next, we also want to fund research identifying biomarkers of disease and progression such that they can be measured and potentially reversed in clinical trials to show efficacy of a drug. And also, obviously, therapeutic discovery and clinical trials, we like to fund those. Can we use our understanding of disease mechanism, potential genetic information, and biomarkers to develop disease-modifying drugs that can be tested in clinical trials? And finally, are there preventative care measures to halt or slow progression of the disease and clinical management strategies to ensure that our patients are living the quality of life that they seek? Okay, so our funding programs has helped to make a significant impact across many disease areas. This is just to highlight one particular disease for ALS, also known as Lou Gehrig's disease. MDA has been funding ALS research since its inception, and MDA has committed over 176 million towards ALS research, which has sparked numerous advancements throughout the history of the field. So beginning with 1993, with funding from MDA, Dr. Bob Brown discovered the first gene responsible for ALS, which is the SOD1 gene. In the following years, MDA contributed funding to the development of the first ALS drug, Riluzole. Recently, we supported the Healy ALS platform trial, which has expanded access to clinical trials and enabled the testing of multiple potential therapies simultaneously, giving patients the opportunity to potentially effective treatments. Another major milestone happened a couple of years ago. Tofersen, also known as Qalsody, is the first genetically targeted therapy for ALS, was approved by the FDA, and this marks a major milestone for the ALS community, and MDA had a direct hand in its development by funding preclinical studies and early phase 1 and phase 2 safety and efficacy studies. It seems to be stuck. Let me see. There we go. So another example is SMA. Whoops. Is SMA a disease that we have seen a dramatic shift in the quality of life for patients due to many advancements in treatments over the past few decades. MDA has been at the forefront of this progress with direct footprint in the development of Spinraza, which is the first approved treatment for SMA. So since the 1990s, MDA funded key research that contributed to the discovery of two key genes, SMN1 and SMN2, by Dr. Judith Melke. And in the years that followed, MDA funding helped to clarify the roles of these genes and in the development of animal models for treatment testing. And in 2007, MDA awarded a grant to Dr. Adrian Craner, who developed a type of therapy called an ASO, or antisense oligonucleotide therapy for SMA, which became the foundation for Spinraza, which is the first approved FDA-approved treatment for SMA. Spinraza was licensed to Ionis and then Biogen, and was later approved in 2016, which was a groundbreaking moment for this community. Another example of a drug that has roots in MDA-funded research is in the laboratory is Myozyme, this drug called Myozyme for the treatment of Pompe disease. And MDA funded Dr. Chen for early preclinical studies into the gene underlying Pompe disease, where a lot of findings on disease mechanisms were made. And we subsequently funded clinical trials where enzyme replacement therapy was being tested for the first time and then approved for use in infantile and later onset Pompe disease. So that just gives you some, an idea of the journey from the lab setting to a drug approval, and sort of how how contributing early funds can help to accelerate the field. So now I want to go into two strategic focus areas that our team is undertaking, and those are in topics of muscle regeneration and gene therapy. So there are two now approved gene therapies on the market, one for SMA and one for DMD, both of which have quite a hefty price tag. So gene therapy is a drug that it is administered only one time. It involves delivering a healthy copy of the gene in order to overcome the faulty copy that underlies the disease. And it does so using a viral vector known as AAV, or adeno-associated virus, and it's used as the delivery vehicle. And it's just a quick rundown of how gene therapy currently works. And although there are two approved therapies right now, this picture shows there are many more companies involved in the preclinical and clinical pipeline that are working on gene therapy and are at various stages, preclinical, phase 1, 2, phase 3, or approved drugs. So there is a lot coming through the pipeline. So despite its many promises and potential, we really are still in our early stages of understanding how to best maximize gene therapy's potential use in humans, particularly as it relates to safety and efficacy. And for the past 4 years, we've held an annual summit to discuss some of these challenges that can create bottlenecks for the clinical translation of genetic therapies. And we typically, the MDA team summarizes these discussions in a meeting report to be disseminated throughout the field. And in the past, we have even set aside funds to further investigate topics that are raised during our summit. So at MDA, we've had a long history of supporting the development of gene therapies. And, we've funded very early laboratory studies on how to introduce new genes into organisms, all the way to the first in human clinical trials of gene therapy for limb-girdle and DMD. And now we are even funding next generation gene therapies that include gene editing strategies, as well as strategies to package and deliver large genes. So we're also quite aware of the current limitations of AAV-based gene therapies, and are allocating resources to address some of these limitations. The first of which is that patients with naturally high titers of AAV antibodies due to natural exposure to the virus at some stage of their life, they are excluded and will not be candidates for gene therapy. So we are collaborating with other organizations in a study to investigate a strategy to lower these antibodies that may preclude some patients from getting treatment. We also want to invest in non-viral based gene therapies as another alternative. And we've made a strategic investment in a startup company called Myasana, who are developing a technology to potentially deliver genes regardless of size and potentially overcoming other limitations of AAV technologies. So this is a bit overwhelming, but I just wanted to convey the point that the majority of the diseases in our portfolio actually fall under the ultra rare or rare bucket and affecting less than 1,000 patients in the US. So the disease that has the highest prevalence is Charcot-Marie tooth 1A, affecting 75,000 people, followed by myasthenia gravis, myotonic dystrophy. And the rest of these are the circles are relatively to scale based on the prevalence. But all the diseases listed here actually affect less than 1,000 patients in the US. And the thing is that many of these are actually amenable to gene therapy, but because they affect so little patients, they are not exactly commercially viable for a company to pursue. So to address this, we created a program called Kickstart. So we want to de-risk gene therapy drug development for ultra-rare diseases by offering resources and expertise to develop gene therapies in our Kickstart program. And we hope to progress these programs to a stage that then becomes attractive to a biotech or a pharma company, because we have de-risked a lot of the earlier stages of development by showing proof of concept and that it works in animals, it works in the patient cells, and that there is no risk, there is very little risk of failure. So the disease that we are piloting that was recommended by our advisory committee is a congenital myasthenic syndrome. And this is a disease that affects less than 300 patients in the US and is linked to muscle weakness and life-threatening episodes of apnea. Kickstart, really brings together experts with different backgrounds that come together to both design and test gene therapies from scratch for this disorder. These are a list of the current activities we are undertaking, and we are hoping to chaperone this project close to the IND stage, where the FDA will give approval for testing in humans. And although this is our pilot project, we hope to demonstrate early success so that we can take on more diseases and grow our Kickstart program to cover more ultra rares that are amenable to gene therapy. All right. Next. Oops. So in addition to our strategic focus on gene therapy, we are also focusing on muscle regenerative strategies. And so gene therapies can at best halt or slow down disease progression, but we really don't anticipate the technology to reverse the damage that's been incurred on muscles and neurons due to disease. And this is why we also want to invest in regenerative technologies, such as cell-based therapies, in order to find disease-modifying treatments for those with advanced stages of disease. And to do this, we have begun conversations with experts in the field, and we have issued a special grant call for new and exciting ideas in this field. So now I want to tell you a little bit about our annual clinical and scientific conference that we hold, and the next one is coming up in just a few weeks' time. So this is a very big event that requires a lot of planning, 1 year's worth of planning. When one ends, we have to start planning for the next one. Last year, we had a total of about 2,000 attendees that either come in person or attend virtually. Although it's held in the US, attendees from all over the world attend, and these attendees include physicians, industry people, allied health professionals, patients and caregivers, and other neuromuscular advocacy groups. And the conference provides a forum to showcase and discuss exciting research and clinical trial updates happening in the space. So just to give you a flavor of the conference from last year, our sessions are organized into tracks such as disease mechanism and therapeutic strategies, practical considerations in gene therapies, lab to life, which has specific disease focus areas. So attendees, they can essentially self-identify into tracks based on their interest. And these conference topics change and vary from year to year. So next I want to tell you about our MOVA patient registry. So you may or may not be aware that MDA has about 180 care centers spread across the United States, where over 60,000 patients are seen annually. MDA decided that, hey, we could leverage the clinic data collected at these sites as a source of real-world data to help research and clinical trials. Maybe patients are interested in donating the data we collect on them towards research. So we created something called the MOVA database, or the MDA Observational Research Database. And MOVA actively collects patient data from each visit for participants, and we currently have over 5,000 participants across 7 diseases. And some things we can learn include, demographics, disease progression, help with recruitment for clinical trials, understanding variable in care, and who's taking what drugs. So, for example, we have data showing here the order of which people are trying different SMA treatments, as well as their preference for out of the 3 approved drugs for this particular disease. So although we capture some common data across the 7 diseases, we also collect very disease-specific data. This is an example of a data form that we collect for ALS patients and has very specific functional scores such as ALS-FRS, as well as other clinical measures that are linked to their specific to ALS and may not say apply for DMD or limb-girdle. So we've had requests for our MOVA data from the research community to study disease progression by regression as well as prediction, and clinical networks, clinicians have requested our data to look at best practices and how to manage their patients better, and companies for clinical trial matching and long-term follow-up studies. And I think that is it. Yeah, that's my talk. Thank you all for your support. That's a snapshot of what we do in the research team at MDA, and I'm open to any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lek. That was a really informative presentation and helps give the patient community an idea of how MDA is supporting neuromuscular research. We do have quite a few questions, so we're hoping to get to a handful of them. Let me just pull my screen back up and we will get started. But I do want to ask you one question we had come in.
I can see the questions. Yeah, so you don't have to read them out to me. Yeah. Are you familiar with OPMD and the Benetech clinical trials? The answer is yes. We invited them to our gene therapy summit this year. We are in conversations with them. We are giving them a platform to present their clinical trial updates at our upcoming conference in Dallas next month. They have some exciting gene therapy results. In regards to mitochondrial myopathy deletion syndrome, is there current research to identify new genes? I believe there is. I can look up more specific details. I don't know it at the top of my head, but I know that there is research into that, in the genetic basis of that. Helping study SIBM. That's inclusion body myopathy. What is the S? I'm not sure what the S refers to. Sporadic, maybe? Um, we are studying hereditary forms of inclusion body myopathy. I'll have to look into how it is specifically supporting the sporadic forms. So I can get back to you about that. We have so many diseases, like over 300, so it's sometimes really hard to keep track of the progress in each one of these diseases. How many people in the US are diagnosed with OPMD? I'm not too sure. I'll have to look up the statistics and get back to you. I'm sure it's easy to Google though. Yeah. And are those the only questions?
So we have a few questions in the chat as well that I can read off to you if that works for you. We had one question, when and where is the next conference?
It is next month, in Dallas, March 16 to the 19th. You can register virtually. Maybe Tess, you can provide this registration details to patients after the
Absolutely.
meeting.
Yeah, we can. I'll have Jessica include that in the chat for us. So another question we had, do I need to opt in to be included in the mover data collection?
Yes, you have to be one of the sites that are collecting the data. However, we are undergoing some structural restructuring changes to that program, and you definitely need to be consented. Yes, into that. So you'll have to talk to your doctor, to your physician.
Great, thank you. We had another question in the chat. Are there any research efforts for adults with LGMD? It seems that all the research and ultimately all the trials and medicines are focused on children since their disease might not be as advanced as adults.
Yeah, it depends so for example, there are tons of ALS trials and that's only adults. And it just depends on the disease, whether it's like affects young children or older children, but there's definitely a lot of trials with adults.
I think they were asking about LGMD specifically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, limb-girdle? You mean the question about the 2A?
So there was one question about the research efforts for adults with LGMD.
Oh, yes, we are definitely there are definitely like Sarepta's conducting those. Ask Bio is conducting those in adults. And so there's a specific question on ongoing or upcoming clinical trials for LGMD2A. I know there are several preclinical programs. I'm not sure that they have reached clinical trial stage. I know that there is one program in abroad with AFM Telethon that may be closer to clinical trials, but they are coming through the pipeline gene therapies for those. So we are funding, for example, Melissa Spencer to make a gene therapy for limb-girdle 2A.
Great, thank you. And I know some of these questions are quite disease specific. Folks just like to come to our webinars, and this is a place they can get answers. So we do have a few more disease specific questions as well, if you're able to answer. What advancements are being made for Becker muscular dystrophy, if you have any information on that?
Yeah, no, there are definitely clinical trials that are happening in Becker muscular dystrophy, such as Edgewise have a myosin inhibitor, and it looks quite promising. So, yeah, I would encourage you to check that out if you haven't already.
Great, thank you. And where can patients find updates on treatments that are available for specific neuromuscular diseases, especially those that are quite rare?
So for treatments, you would ask, your treating doctor, neurologist. But for clinical trials, the doctor that you see may not be participating in the clinical trial or may not know of a clinical trial that's happening for your disease. In that case, I would go to clinicaltrials.gov because that shows you, maybe I can type it in somewhere. You can search by your disease and see all the clinical trials that are happening and where they're happening for your disease. I don't know if people visit that site, but they should.
Yeah, that's great. Either Jessica, if you can put it in the chat, Dr. Lek, or Jessica can, and that way folks
I
can
don't
can.
I don't think I have the permission to type. Oh
Okay,
wait,
well,
I can. I
oh,
can.
Okay,
wonderful.
I
No.
put it in there. It's in the
Oh,
chat.
thank you, Jessica.
Uh-huh.
Clinicaltrials.gov. Is there clinical trials for myotonic dystrophy? Yes, there is. Yes, there is ASO clinical trials happening. I believe it's two companies, at least two companies are doing trials for myotonic right now and more in the pipeline. It's definitely a very hot space right now for antisense oligonucleotide therapy.
Great, thank you. I have a few more questions here that came in at registration. With all the advancements that have come up in the recent years, do you expect that we'll find cures for many of these progressive neuromuscular diseases? And when will that happen? I'm impatient, is what they said.
Oh, believe me, I know. I was also like, when my husband was diagnosed with limb-girdle, we didn't know anything about science, and we just naively, said, "Oh, forget it. They don't know what they're doing. Let's find a cure ourselves." And as scientists, we kind of shy away from the word cure because cure, to me, means you can completely reverse the disease to in a patient that they become indistinguishable from a healthy individual. I think that that's a little optimistic. There can be treatments, disease modifying treatments that alter the course of the disease progression by slowing it down. And we are definitely getting, as I mentioned, approvals for many therapies that are happening at a quite a frequent rate now, and lots are going into clinical testing. And it's really important to keep funding the research. You have to be aware of where the research is happening for your particular disease and for your particular disease gene or whatever is the cause. Um, so yeah, so definitely just keep in touch with like the investigators, what they're publishing, and what, your community is saying about your particular disease gene. Um, and so, yes, I got an answer for the person with the question on the sporadic IBM. We've funded Tom Lloyd on his preclinical studies to develop a mouse model for IBM, SIBM. That's how we have recently helped with that disease. So I just got a message from my my portfolio director.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you for answering that in real time.
Yes.
We do appreciate it. So on that note about funding, we did have quite a few questions about where does MDA receive funding to do these grant programs, and does MDA receive any federal funds?
No, we don't receive any federal funds. We receive from donations, from fundraising events. That's mainly how we get our money. Yep. So either
Wonderful.
small campaigns, big campaigns, personal donations, major donors, or like, campaigns such as, Feel the Boot with the firefighters, or like, the Shamrock, fundraiser. There's, many different programs you can help to donate.
Yes, MDA has a robust fundraising department. It's really wonderful.
Yep.
We have another question here. NPR had a recent report on rebuilding muscles and mentioned ALS and other diseases that may benefit from this progress. Do you have any information on this report or on this research that's being done?
I'm not sure which particular research they're mentioning, but as I mentioned, we do have a specific focus on muscle regenerative strategies, and currently we are more advanced and know more about how to regenerate muscle than neurons. And in ALS, they need to regenerate neurons that are lost in their nervous system. So that is actually a topic of one of the sessions at our conference. So if you would like to stay tuned, it will be a collaboration between MDA and the ALS Association. We'll put on that session, and we'll be bringing in some of the experts of that topic to share their thoughts.
Great, thank you. I think I've answered, we've had all the questions that I had listed answered.
Okay.
Unless you're seeing any more. I can't see the chat when I'm screen sharing.
Yeah, I can see that. I'm not sure what this question means. Are you going to have limb-girdle gene therapy for Adéli's? I'm not too sure. So if that person can clarify. Limb-girdle adult therapy. As I mentioned, yes, there are many limb-girdle drugs in the pipeline and in clinical trials, both small molecule and gene therapy. So it depends on which form of limb-girdle you have. Another question is, do you know if it is possible to have limb-girdle and OPMD? Sure, I don't see why not. They could be. You'd be unlucky, but sure. What are your thoughts on CAR T therapies in myopathies? I'm not too sure yet what the target of the CAR T would be in myopathy, so they haven't really been explored too much. Are there clinical trials or medications for FSHD? Yes, that is another active space. There are companies now that are testing, several companies testing also antisense oligonucleotide therapies to knock down DUX4 involved in FSHD. Maybe like at least 3 companies or more. And also gene therapies for that are maybe entering the clinic soon. Any research using organoids? Plenty. Yeah, that we're seeing coming through our research portfolio. Lots of organoids. Yeah, like muscle ones, brain ones. Yeah, I think that's it. How is limb-girdle diagnosed? Well, typically, to be suspected of limb-girdle, you present with muscle weakness, and they'll do a blood test and they'll say, oh, your creatine kinase levels are really high. That indicates like muscle wasting. And then they'll do nowadays they'll do they'll look at your DNA from your blood to see if you have mutations in any of the genes that are causing limb-girdle. So you can ask your doctor to screen you for that using a blood test. Okay. Yeah, I think that's it. I see more questions in the other chat. There's 2. There's the Q&A chat and then the webinar chat. So I'm a bit.
Yes. And we've been, Jessica and I have been monitoring the chat. So we've picked up on pretty much all of the questions that we had in there as well, I believe.
Mm-hmm. So thoughts on where you can get a definitive diagnosis of limb-girdle? You would see a neurologist and they would do like a gene panel, and they will tell you. So there's a company typically, I can't think of it off the top of my head now, where they screen those genes for mutations in limb-girdle, for genes that cause limb-girdle, sorry. And then they'll tell you, oh yeah, you have a mutation in limb-girdle. Just talk, you can talk to your neurologist. Invitae panel, correct, that's the one. Invitae panel. That's the word that I was looking for. And an internship within MDA for college. Um, there we have summer programs, not for college, but we fund people outside just finishing their PhD that want to transition to becoming a an investigator and a full-time scientist, but not like to begin college itself. My question was, does Mover have all the muscular dystrophies in their registry? No, currently we only have 7. But we are looking, as I mentioned, to restructure and to rapidly expand across all the diseases. So stay tuned. Okay.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Lek, for that thorough Q&A and for your presentation on how MDA has been impacting neuromuscular research. And thank you for the wonderful work you do and for taking time for our patient community today. We appreciate it.
Oh, no worries. And yeah, feel free to reach out to Tess if you have any further questions, and I can, try to address them. Or, it's yeah, or you can look it up on Google. Lots of reading can be done. Yes. All right.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much again, Dr. Lek. And yes, please,
Yes.
everybody, feel free to reach out to us and to the Resource Center as well, or to us personally and community education. And we're happy to help you get all those questions answered. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Good luck.
Well, this year marks MDA's 75th anniversary. This milestone has been made possible by generations of dedicated support from people living with neuromuscular disease, their families, researchers, clinicians, volunteers, and donors who boldly drive our mission forward. As we look ahead, we remain committed to honoring this legacy, building on the impact we've made together, and continuing our momentum towards transformative progress for people living with neuromuscular disorders. To learn more, visit MDA75.org. Last but not least, we again invite you to join the MDA community. Joining is free and will help you stay up to date on our programs as well as the latest research. Please scan the QR code with your smartphone or visit the link in the chat. MDA would again like to thank our sponsor, Regeneron, for partnering with us to bring you today's webinar. We would again like to thank Dr. Lek for sharing her time and expertise with us today. We want to hear from you. What did you like about today's program? What can we do differently in the future? Please fill out the brief survey that will pop up right after the webinar. Your feedback is very important to us. If you have any other questions or you're looking for support or resources, please contact MDA's Resource Center at 1-833-ASK-MDA1. That's 1-833-275-6321, or via email at resourcecenter@mdausa.org, and we will be sure to get back to you. Thank you again to everyone who joined us today, and this will conclude our webinar. Have a great day, and we will see you again soon.